This is from Alabama.com, which that could lead you down some weird sites if you Google that too hard. But what's been happening in Alabama? So there's been a prison strike, and it's entered its second week, and they kind of summarize a little bit, but I did want to go into more details, so I brought a couple of their other articles with us. This is from Savannah. Tyrens-Fernandes wrote this particular piece. So the Alabama prison strike has entered its second week as inmates continue to protest the state's parole and sentencing laws and living conditions inside facilities. On September 26, inmates in all Alabama Department of Corrections prisons stopped working. Inmates normally do the work in food service, laundry, and other tasks that keep prisons running. Alabama is one of the only 7 states, including Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas, that do not pay inmates for labor. So Shannon Barlow, an inmate at Limestone Correctional Facility, told WBHM, "There's no hope, there's no promise of a future, and we're the ones basically who have been holding the ceiling up over our own heads all these years, and we're just waking up to the fact that this is wrong." According to WVTM, specific asks from the strikers, including the immediate repeal of Alabama's habitual offender law, a repeal of the state's drive-by shooting statute, mandatory parole criteria that guarantees parole for all eligible inmates, and ending life without parole sentences. So yeah, that's been their specific things, right? Just to reiterate, they want to repeal the Alabama's habitual offender law, which is at like a strike three strikes. Okay. Repeal the state's drive-by shooting statute, which I wonder what that is. And mandatory parole criteria. Last week, Governor Ivey called the demands unreasonable and said she hopes her plan to create the two new mega prisons using COVID relief funds will help address some of the inmates' needs. Yeah, let's build another prison. That should fix it. It's going to be like a regular Walmart, but mega this time. So, number one, our goal is for public safety, pure and simple, and the demands that they're giving are just unreasonable and would probably require other legislation. Cannot just be mandated unilaterally. We still got our 2 prisons being built, so we can better provide for the safety of the inmates as well as the workers. Meanwhile, inmates say corrections workers and officials are taking retaliatory measures against them, including reducing the amount of food they receive from 3 meals a day to 2, and canceling weekend visits due to these stoppages and the impact on staff resources, quote unquote. In an interview with AL.com, Dion Caldwell, founder of the advocacy group Both Sides of the Wall and a strike organizer, said she believes canceling visitation will increase tensions. Yeah, I don't see how that wouldn't. I think canceling visitations will only compound the frustration inside, Caldwell said in an email. These men/women look forward to seeing their family. This is the only contact they physically have with them, and this is why a lot of them stay out of any trouble. Many families have taken off work, paid for travel and hotels in preparation of visitation this weekend, and they abruptly cancel it because they want to punish the men and women inside for exercising our and their First Amendment rights. They are doing exactly what they've been doing for so long, which is trying to maintain control through loss of privileges for no misconduct, retaliation, and fear. So they are doing exactly what they've... Right. So the Department of Justice sued Alabama in December 2020, alleging the failure to protect prisoners from inmate-on-inmate violence and sexual abuse, failure to protect them from excessive force by staff, and failure to provide safe conditions of confinement violate constitutional prohibitions on cruel and unusual punishment. The DOJ first made most of the allegations in April 2019 and said at the time of the lawsuit that Alabama had failed to address problems. However, a trial in the case is not expected until 2024.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is more focused on like what was happening like right after that strikes started happening, right? So a work stoppage by inmates in Alabama prisons to protest for better conditions has moved into its third day, right? So like this is that other article was from like 2 weeks after that event, right? So this would be like 3 days after that event, which was on the 26th, right? So moved into its third day and is resulting in fewer meals for inmates. So some claim the cut back to 2 meals a day was in retaliation for the strike. The Alabama Department of Corrections said that was not the case. The strike started Monday in conjunction with a rally where organizers called for sentencing and parole reforms in the Alabama system, which the U.S. Department of Justice said incarcerates men in violent conditions that violate the Constitution. So that's the DOJ saying this. Which they kind of went into in that previous article. But relatives and friends of inmates have reported since Monday that prisons were not serving hot meals and that prisoners were receiving no lunch. On social media, people claiming to be inmates at ADOC's St. Clair and Staten prisons posted photos of trays containing a scoop of peanut butter, 2 slices of bread, and a few pieces of fruit. At another facility, men posted photos of trays with a single slice of cheese and a scoop of grits.
Ugh.
They are trying to starve us out at Staten, one posted. The kitchen at William C. Holman Correctional Facility mostly closed after the prison partially shut down in 2020, leaving inmates at the facility receiving meals from nearby GK Fountain Correctional Facility. Many inmates there are unhappy that their meals are affected by striking workers at a separate prison. Most inmates have only received peanut butter or bologna sandwiches, hot dogs, or bread slices since Monday, according to attorneys and videos posted on TikTok by people claiming to be inmates at ADOC facilities. The Alabama Department of Corrections responded to questions about the strike today, said the cutback was logistical, not retaliatory. Of course it's not retaliatory, fucking cops. Of course they would say that. No, we would never. Like, the ADOC said the strike is continuing in varying degrees at most of the state's major prisons. Alabama has 13 prisons for men and 1 for women. The ADOC said inmates were on a holiday schedule that provides just 2 meals a day. Well, happy holidays, everybody. All facilities remain operational, the ADOC said. However, these work stoppages have affected food services, given that inmate workers make up a large part of the facility support workforce. Facilities have been on a holiday meal schedule since Monday. The schedule allows for 2 meals instead of 3. This is not a retaliatory measure, but logistically necessary to ensure that other critical services are being provided. Once the work stoppages end, facilities will once again be able to provide regular meal service. ADOC is hopeful that regular meal service can be restored as soon as possible. The ADOC also said controlled movement and other security measures have been deployed to maintain a secure environment. The ADOC does not comment on specific security procedures due to the safety of the inmates, our staff, and the public. So I think CJ brought up a particular inmate who was having like health problems already, right? That required him to have like particular nutrition, right? And what that like drop in like meals quality and availability like did to that guy was pretty messed up. So, you know, if you want to go see that, you should go check CJ's stream on that. But I don't know if they include that in this story, but some programming, including Ingram State Technical College classes, have been limited, but most have not been affected because most programs have their own staff. The ADOC said it is common practice in prisons nationwide to utilize inmate workers to help provide various critical services like food, service, laundry, and etc. Collin, would you like to tell the man in this article what he's missing there? What do they do that these prisons are not doing?
Hey.
Damn right. Diane Caldwell, a founder of the advocacy group Both Sides of the Wall and a strike organizer, said it is ADOC's responsibility to feed inmates 3 times a day, regardless of whether the inmates are striking. It's like, yeah, this is your job. Like, you know, That's what we pay you to do, is give them 3 hot meals and a bunk. Like, you know, the regulations say they're supposed to be fed 3 times a day, 2 of those being hot meals, Caldwell said, and due to their shortage of staffing, they're feeding them on the holiday schedule, which shouldn't be the burden of the inmates. It's the burden of the staff because it's their responsibility to make sure that the inmates are fed. So Caldwell spoke at Monday's rally outside of ADOC offices in Montgomery. Family members of inmates said they feared for their loved ones in an environment the DOJ said was plagued with assaults, sexual abuse, weapons, drugs, and excessive force by correctional officers. The state has acknowledged problems, but has denied the DOJ claims that conditions violate the Constitution. Speakers talked about the decline in the rate of paroles granted, even for inmates who are deemed good candidates, according to the parole board's own risk assessment guidelines. Today, Caldwell said that leads to a loss of hope and helps feed the violence. So, what? Yeah, okay. Oh, are you moving it, maybe? That might be it.
No.
Weird.
Nope.
They have no way out, Caldwell said, and when you do that, that brings violence because they're sitting there, everyone is aggravated, they're agitated, and their tolerance level is very low. So they need some kind of hope, some type of incentive, and some type of window to be able to enter back into society. And basically, that's through the parole board, and we need some relief there. Officials defending the parole system say the rate has declined, partly because violent offenders make up a higher proportion of the prison population than it did before changes to sentencing laws made in the last decade. Caldwell said advocates for reforms in safer prisons are not asking that dangerous offenders be released. Thoughts so far, Care Bear?
It's funny how, like, you know, they're basically treating them like employees and they're not paying them.
Yes.
So it's slave labor.
That's and exactly they went on strike. They're like, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like,
so, and they had every right to, considering, you know, the circumstances. But yeah, just like the cops, they're going to be like, oh, like, we moved to the schedule because our workers, and I'm sure this is something that they're not necessarily saying, like, to the press. It's like the workers are the inmates of whom you're not paying,
right,
in order to provide the services to their own inmates, essentially. Yeah. So I'm sure they left that out on purpose in the media, given, like, because then they would look like dicks. But then again, yeah, I'm sure the cops don't care about looking like dicks anyway.
When have they ever? Like, yeah, I mean, this is like forced hunger strike now, right? Like,
basically, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is literally worker struggle at the most basic level, and you can clearly see what they're willing to do when they have complete control. They're gonna remove your visitation to your family, your kids who've all planned to be here on that weekend, like they always do, so you can see your children, like. You know what I mean? Anyway. So Caldwell says, we don't want the floodgates open. We understand that there are people that need to be in prison. We understand that people need to do time for crimes that they committed. However, we're asking for inmates to get a fair shot. Former inmate Eric Buchanan of Birmingham, who also spoke at Monday's rally, said he hopes the strike can draw attention to conditions that are ripe for violence. The drug overdoses that's going on in the prisons, we need to see that changed. Buchanan said, fentanyl is in the prisons, heroin is there. All this stuff is not contributing to the rehabilitation of anybody. It's like survival in there now, and so we want to see the conditions change. The legislature and governor have approved a plan to build 2 4,000-bed men's prisons that will replace some of the existing facilities. Officials say that they will be safer for inmates and staff and will be better able to offer rehabilitation programs and medical care. The prisons are expected to be ready to occupy in when? 2026.
26.
So even that, like, the weirdest response ever. Like, well, we're building more prisons to, like, you know, terrorize inmates with, like, you know, that will immediately be filled up to make profit.
Right.
You know. But we'll continue a little bit to the original article on their strike. So here's one of the mothers.
You're in there to help them. Don't do them like that. So if anyone got something to say, y'all come up here and talk about the people. Don't let them go down like that. I got 2 nephews in there. One been in there when he was the age of 15. He been in there 15 years. And I think it's wrong. He should be out by now. He should be out by now. And then I have another one in there. They're going to give him life because he was in a circle with someone. Vito Gilbert, Rico Gilbert, freedom, freedom, free my nephew. Thank y'all.
So, you know, people getting in the streets for people that can't be in the streets. But this article goes on. The Alabama Department of Corrections said it has received reports of inmate work stoppages, right? So both of the wall called for the strike beginning this morning as a protest of conditions in the state's overcrowded, understaffed prisons. The ADOC said it is controlling the movements of inmates and has deployed other security measures. The ADOC said it does not comment on security procedures because of the safety of inmate staff and the public. They cannot confirm nor deny whether they're terrible. All facilities are operational and there have been no disruption of critical services. This was, again, that Monday, right? Except what happens, like, 3 days later? He changes his tune to now there's a problem of critical services, like food production. Right? So Commissioner John Hamm, not that John Hamm, different John Hamm, said in a statement, the inmates on strike include food workers who help prepare the prison meals. Meals are considered a critical service, the ADOC said. 2 relatives of inmates at Staten Correctional Facility told AL.com in emails today that prisoners there were not served lunch today. So that was the start, right? Kelly Betts, public information manager for ADOC, said all meals were happening, but that some might be delayed. Both sides of the wall held a rally outside the ADOC offices in Montgomery this morning. About 80 people attended the event. Speakers called for reforms to Alabama's sentencing parole laws. The group, which included former inmates and family members of inmates, called for improvements to conditions in prisons and medical care. Take care of them while they're in there, said Marquetta London of Montgomery, who said she has 2 nephews in prison. They're not taking care of those prisoners like they should. They're just not doing it. Speakers talked about the plight of inmate Castiello. What is that? Castellio?
Yes.
Castellio Vaughn?
Yeah.
Whose sister posted photos on Facebook that show him emaciated. This is the one that CJ talked about. A civil rights lawyer hired by the family said Vaughn's condition has deteriorated since he underwent surgery in August to remove a portion of his intestines as a result of gunshot injuries sustained prior to his incarceration. The ADOC released a statement Saturday saying that Vaughn has received appropriate medical care. The ADOC said Vaughn has requested and received medical attention at least 11 times between July 30th and September 22nd, including major surgery and a stay of at least 17 days in an outside hospital. The ADOC released more information about Vaughn on Tuesday after he signed a waiver allowing more disclosure about his condition. The ADOC said Vaughn has repeatedly refused medical assessment and medical treatment after being treated at Jackson Hospital for complications of the surgery in August. The DOJ has alleged that conditions in Alabama's prisons violated the constitutional rights of the incarcerated men because of inmate-on-inmate violence and sexual abuse, excessive use of force by staff, and a failure to provide safe physical conditions. The state has acknowledged problems in its prisons, but disputes the allegation that conditions violate the constitutional prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. I'm going to go with X for doubt. Just press X for doubt on that. Advocates at today's both sides of the wall rally called for repeal of the state's Habitual Felony Offender Act, which results in longer prison sentences, including life without parole, sentences for some felons who have not committed a crime that caused a physical injury. The group called for the establishment of criteria that would guarantee parole for those inmates who meet the criteria. The rate of parolees granted in Alabama has dropped so sharply in recent years. They called for a streamlined review of parole for elderly inmates and those with serious medical problems. Other reforms they support, including reducing the maximum sentence for juvenile offenders from 30 years to 15 years, eliminating life without parole sentences, and applying sentencing guidelines that took effect in 2013 retroactively. Former inmate Eric Buchanan said his experience in prison taught him that some inmates belong there, but that others change through their own initiative and deserve another chance. There's some folks in there that will come out right now and do some horrible stuff, Buchanan said. I slept beside them, but I'm here advocating for some men that I know and watched whose lives changed. I know and watched the power of God work in their lives. I know some men in there who deserve a second chance. I knew some women at Tutwiler who have done enough time and they need to be free and be out here with their children and grandchildren now. I know this to be factual, so I'm advocating for them who have changed and those who want to get out here in society and make a real difference, who want to get out and have a real job and a real family and be a producer. The Alabama legislator and Governor Kay Ivey approved a plan to build 2 4,000-bed prisons, right? To replace some of the state's existing prisons, some of which the ADOC says are not feasible to renovate. Lawmakers and the governor say the new facilities will be safer and be better equipped for healthcare and rehabilitation programs in the old prisons, but Buchanan noted that the new prisons won't be ready for years. The ADOC said they could be occupied in 26. We're talking about, could be. We're talking about 4 or 5 years from now having those buildings completed, but men are dying yesterday. Buchanan said, so we would like to see some type of relief for people who have been locked up for a substantial amount of years who deserve another chance. You're going to have enough men to fill those new prisons up so you can give some relief to the ones that are stuffed in these cans right now. Couldn't agree more on that. Closing thoughts?
Gail said this in the chat, build hospitals.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
we're not doing.
Well, and these prisons are also the biggest proponents of mental health care right now. Some of the only.
Right, but I think that's part of the problem is that, and this is kind of where the idea of defunding the police comes in. Because prisons now are essentially becoming, in a lot of ways, community centers. In a very twisted way, or I think more a homeless shelter, because people are getting in trouble specifically, for some type of shelter, but then prisons themselves are becoming hospitals, community centers, all these things into one facility. And you're not building enough. Well, the idea that you're saying you should build more, I think, in of itself is a problem. But you're packing these men and women in them. You're not planning to build any more, or at least you're taking your time to build any more. And meanwhile, the health and livelihood of these inmates are at risk. So it's kind of in a way, they're kind of getting the idea that they're saying it could be ready within the next 4 years just kind of implies to me that they're not intending to build these anytime soon. They're trying to kill them in there, so trying to stuff as many as they can, basically like a coffin, and just see if an amount of them die, in that context. But so the idea that they're striking, good for them, and like I said, it's of course the cops are going to spin it to be like, oh, you know, like they're workers, but you're not paying them. You know, they're essentially volunteers who you're forcing them to work to essentially take care of their own, and you're not treating them well. Or at least with some decent basic human decency, to be able to at least live and do well there.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, good on them to strike. And good on the community for coming out and in solidarity with them.
I agree. I hope there's more of this, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I think you see a lot with what's happening economically right now. We're starting to get food shortages might be a thing in the near future. I think stuff like this, where like the prisons are going to feel the brunt of that probably more than.
And it's only going to get worse with crime, food shortages, people not getting enough money, like people are getting desperate, know, and like crime is going to go up. And as a result, like I'm sure prisons are going to be over, like, which in a way, it may be what the prison industrial complex may want to justify building more prisons.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's part of it.
That's exactly what that all three of those articles were like. Oh, we're gonna build new ones, new ones.
So it's almost kind of like a perfect storm, coming out of the pandemic, of people getting in trouble to justify the idea of, one, funding the police more, but two, building more prisons.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is they're not building them fast enough. So obviously they're going to try and stuff as many people as they can and just let them rot in hell in there, And for many of them, it's again, simple, like minor issues that don't need jail time for.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of that, on the horizon, if people are not necessarily getting out on the streets and kind of calling this out.
I agree.